Texas does not do anything quietly or in small quantities. The state is enormous, loud, and deeply committed to doing things its own way, which is probably why it has produced a higher concentration of genuinely strange places per square mile than almost anywhere else in the country. From fake designer stores in the desert to aliens buried in small-town cemeteries, nothing out here really requires an explanation. These are the 15 weirdest places in Texas you won't believe exist. Place 15, Cadillac Ranch, Amarillo. Off Interstate 40 on the western edge of Amarillo, 10 Cadillacs are buried nose down in a flat, open field. Their tail fins point toward the sky at the same angle as the sides of the Great Pyramid of Giza. At least, that's the claim. They have been there since 1974, and they are covered in so many layers of spray paint that they no longer really resemble cars. They resemble something stranger, a cross between a monument, a mess, and a running joke about the American dream. The installation was created in 1974 by Chip Lord, Hudson Marquez, and Doug Michels, an art collective called the Ant Farm, based in San Francisco. They approached an eccentric Amarillo millionaire named Stanley Marsh III, not Stanley Marsh III, he considered the Roman numeral pretentious, with the idea of a tribute to the rise and fall of the Cadillac tail fin. Marsh loved it. He provided the field, the funding, and roughly $3,000 to buy the cars and rent a backhoe. The 10 Cadillacs, ranging from a 1948 Club sedan to a 1963 Sedan DeVille, were driven into the field on the summer solstice and buried in a single day. From the beginning, people came to spray paint them, and Marsh didn't mind. He moved the installation 2 miles west in 1997 as Amarillo's city limits crept closer. The cars were quietly exhumed by crane and replanted in a cow pasture along I-40, where they stand today. Visitors are encouraged to bring spray paint. Whatever you put on the cars will be covered by someone else within hours. There is no charge to visit. There is no gate. You just pull off the highway and walk through an unlocked gap in a fence into a field that smells permanently of spray paint and cow. Stanley Marsh III once described the Cadillac Ranch as a monument to the American dream to a boy coming of age in the 1950s. Journalist Charles Kuralt, who put the installation on the national map after stopping his bus there in 1975, offered his own take. We thought maybe the farmer just parked them this way each year after he bought a new model. Place 14, Prada Marfa, Valentine. About 37 miles northwest of Marfa, on a desolate stretch of U.S. Highway 90 in Jeff Davis County, there is a perfect replica of a Prada boutique. It has display windows with actual Prada shoes and handbags inside. It has the Prada logo. It does not have an open door. Nobody works there. Nobody sells anything. It is a permanent art installation, and if you stop to take a photo, which virtually everyone does, you will be standing next to a building in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert that has no intention of ever opening for business. Prada Marfa was created by Norwegian-Danish art duo Elmgreen and Dragset and inaugurated on October 1st, 2005. The construction cost $120,000 and was funded by non-profit organizations, not by Prada, which had no financial involvement. Miuccia Prada gave the artists permission to use the brand's logo and donated shoes and handbags from the fall/winter 2005 collection, which have never been replaced. The building was constructed from biodegradable adobe, plaster, and glass. The original plan was to let it gradually decay into the landscape. That plan lasted exactly one night. The morning after the installation opened, it had been vandalized. The door torn off, 14 right-footed shoes and 6 handbags stolen, and the words "dumb" and "dum-dum" spray painted on the walls. The building was repaired, shatterproof windows installed, and an alarm system added. The shoes still only fit right feet. The handbags have no bottoms. In 2013, the Texas Department of Transportation decided the Prada logo on the building constituted an illegal advertisement. After negotiations, the structure was officially reclassified as a museum. with the building itself as its only exhibit. It has remained open 24 hours a day ever since, to absolutely no customers, in the middle of the desert. Place 13, the Marfa Lights, Marfa. West Texas has a lot of empty sky and very little to interrupt the darkness on a clear night, which makes it easier to notice when something unexplained appears on the horizon. The Marfa Lights, sometimes called the Marfa Mystery Lights, are a genuine, documented, and still unexplained optical phenomenon that has been observed near the small city of Marfa since at least 1883. The first recorded sighting came from a young cowhand named Robert Reed Ellison, who spotted flickering lights while herding cattle through Paisano Pass and assumed they were Apache campfires. Other settlers told him they had seen the same lights, but that whenever anyone rode out to investigate, there was nothing there. No campfire, no ashes, nothing. The lights would reappear as soon as the riders returned to camp. The lights appear roughly 9 to 30 times a year, usually southeast of Marfa, in the direction of the Chinati Mountains. They have been described as orbs, sometimes white, sometimes yellow-orange, sometimes blue or red, that hover, split, merge, disappear, and reappear. During World War I, people feared they were signals guiding an invasion. During World War II, pilots from the nearby training base searched for their source from the air, without success. Scientists from the University of Texas at Dallas, who studied the lights between 2000 and 2008, concluded that at least some of them are automobile headlights on US Highway 67 being distorted by warm desert air. That explanation covers some of what people see. It does not cover all of it, particularly the sightings that predate the highway and the sightings that don't correspond to any vehicle traffic patterns. The Texas Department of Transportation built an official viewing area 9 miles east of Marfa in 2003. The lights appear on their own schedule, without warning, and not particularly often. The explanation, if there is one, remains entirely up to you. Place 12. Aurora Cemetery. Aurora. About 20 miles northwest of Dallas in Wise County, in a small town called Aurora, there is a grave that allegedly belongs to an extraterrestrial being. The story goes back to April 17, 1897, 50 years before Roswell, when a cigar-shaped airship reportedly crashed into the windmill of a local judge named J.S. Proctor, burst into flames, and scattered debris across several acres of land. The pilot, described in the Dallas Morning News 2 days later as not of this world, was killed in the crash. The townspeople gave him a Christian burial in the Aurora Cemetery. They nicknamed him Ned. The article describing the crash was written by local resident S.E. Hayden and published in the Dallas Morning News on April 19, 1897. It reported that the debris was scattered over Judge Proctor's property, that the wreckage was disposed of in a nearby well, and that the pilot's body, badly disfigured, was recovered and buried with proper rites. Whether this actually happened is a question that has never been resolved. A woman named Etta Pegues, interviewed by Time magazine in 1980 when she was 86 years old, said the story was invented by town residents to bring interest to Aurora after the railroad bypassed the town and its economy collapsed. In the 1970s, investigators from MUFON examined the cemetery and found what appeared to be a grave marker with a crude etching of an unusual object, though that marker has since disappeared. Ground-penetrating radar later detected an unmarked grave in the area where the pilot was said to be buried. The Cemetery Association has never allowed exhumation. Aurora's town government now acknowledges the story as a local legend and leans into it. The site near the crash has been labeled Area 114. A Texas Historical Commission marker at the cemetery references the burial. People leave trinkets on the grave. Ned has been good for business. Place 11, Waco Mammoth National Monument, Waco. In the spring of 1978, two men named Paul Barron and Eddie Bufkin were hiking along a dry creek bed near Waco, looking for arrowheads and fossils. When Barron grabbed a piece of bone sticking out of a riverbank embankment, he pulled it free. It was 3 feet long. He took it to the Strecker Museum at Baylor University, where researchers identified it as the femur of a Columbian mammoth. What followed was one of the most significant paleontological discoveries in American history. Between 1978 and 1997, excavations at the site uncovered the remains of 24 Columbian mammoths, along with a western camel, the tooth of a juvenile saber-toothed cat, and other Pleistocene-era animals. The mammoths are believed to have died approximately 65,000 to 68,000 years ago, in 3 separate flash flood events along the Bosque River. The first event alone killed at least 19 animals, an entire nursery herd, adults surrounding juveniles in what appear to be protective positions, all drowned when the river rose suddenly. This site is the only known discovery of a nursery herd of Columbian mammoths anywhere in the United States. The mammoths, standing 14 feet tall and weighing up to 20,000 pounds, were still in the positions they died in when excavators found them. President Barack Obama designated the site a national monument in 2015 under the Antiquities Act. The monument is open to the public in Waco, about 100 miles south of Dallas, a city that most people associate with a certain compound siege from 1993, and before that, with Dr. Pepper, which was invented there in 1885. The Mammoth thing is newer and, depending on how you weigh your history, considerably more scientifically significant. Place 10. The Cathedral of Junk, Austin. In a residential backyard in South Austin, a man named Vince Hanneman has spent nearly 4 decades building a cathedral out of other people's trash. The Cathedral of Junk, which is its actual name, not an Art World nickname, has been under continuous construction since 1988 and currently stands about 33 feet tall. It is made of bicycle wheels, bowling balls, television sets, Christmas tree stands, computer keyboards, lawnmowers, hubcaps, porcelain toilets, and essentially anything else that someone wanted to throw away and that Hanneman could use to extend the structure upward. Hanneman started with his own discarded objects, gradually filling his backyard with a sculpture that grew from a few feet to a few stories. People began bringing things from across the city. The Cathedral of Junk became an Austin fixture, a place that appeared in travel guides, attracted visitors from around the world, and somehow coexisted with its residential neighborhood for most of its existence. In 2010, the city of Austin issued a stop work order and declared the structure unsafe, threatening demolition. Hanneman rallied supporters, underwent inspections, made structural modifications, and eventually won the right to keep it. The Cathedral of Junk is currently maintained as a private attraction. Visits are by appointment, typically made through Hanneman's contact information, and the small fee he charges helps fund its upkeep. It is not a museum. It is not an art installation funded by a gallery or a foundation. It is a backyard in South Austin that has been filling up with junk for nearly 4 decades, assembled by one person according to no plan other than what fits next and what can be structurally justified to city inspectors. Place 9. The Barbed Wire Museum, McLean, Texas. In the panhandle town of McLean, inside a building that was once a brazier factory, there is a museum dedicated entirely to barbed wire. This is not a joke, and it is not a small museum. The Devil's Rope Museum, which is what barbed wire was called by the Plains Indians and cattle ranchers who encountered it, holds one of the largest collections of barbed wire in the world, along with related tools, equipment, historical artifacts, and educational exhibits about the role of barbed wire in transforming the American West. Barbed wire arrived in the 1870s and did something that nothing else had been able to do. It allowed farmers and ranchers to fence millions of acres of open rangeland quickly and cheaply. The open range that defined cattle culture in Texas effectively ended within a generation of barbed wire's invention. The fencing conflicts it caused, known as the fence-cutting wars, led to violence across the state in the 1880s, until Texas passed laws making fence-cutting a felony in 1884. The museum documents all of this, along with something that most people don't know. Barbed wire has an enormous variety of specific designs, each patented separately, with names like 3-point sheet metal star barb, twisted key barb, and half-round stick-tight barb. The museum's collection includes hundreds of distinct barb types. There is also a barbed wire scorpion sculpture, a life-size promotional character named Bob War, and a wall display of 100 years of cowboy tools. It is, in short, a genuinely comprehensive accounting of one of the most consequential inventions in Western American history, housed in a building that used to make underwear. The brassiere factory context is never explained. It just is. Place 8. Sam Houston Statue, Huntsville. Outside the city of Huntsville, visible from Interstate 45, there is a concrete statue of Sam Houston that stands 67 feet tall. This is, by most measurements, the tallest statue of an American hero in the United States. It was created by sculptor David Atticus, a Houston-born, French-trained artist who has made a career out of enormous concrete heads and figures, including a series of presidential busts that have migrated between various locations across the country. Sam Houston was the president of the Republic of Texas, the governor of both Tennessee and Texas, and the man who commanded the Texian army to victory over Mexican General Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto in 1836, securing Texas independence. He is, to put it plainly, a figure of considerable historical weight. The statue in Huntsville, completed in 1994, is appropriately large and appropriately located in Huntsville, which is also home to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's execution chamber, 7 prisons, and a Sam Houston State University. It is a town of many layers. What makes the statue genuinely strange is the competition it creates with another Atticus creation in Angleton, Texas, where a 76-foot figure of Stephen F. Austin stands on a 12-foot base. Whether Houston or Austin is taller depends entirely on how you measure. Texans argue about it. Atticus has never resolved the matter, which is probably the correct artistic choice. The Houston statue sits at a highway rest stop visitor center, surrounded by small trees and parking spaces. It is 67 feet of concrete and civic pride, and it is very, very large. Place 7. Stonehenge 2, Ingram. In the small hill country town of Ingram, on the grounds of the Hill Country Arts Foundation, there is a near full-scale replica of Stonehenge. It has been there since 1991, when a local rancher named Al Shepard and his neighbor Doug Hill built it out of rebar and plaster. It is accompanied by 2 replica Easter Island Moai statues, which have absolutely nothing to do with Stonehenge, but which Shepard and Hill also built, apparently because they had the materials and the momentum. The project began when Shepard found a large flat slab of limestone on his property and propped it against a fence post. His neighbor looked at it and said it resembled a Stonehenge stone. One thing led to another. Over 2 years, Shepard and Hill constructed a replica covering about 90% of the original Stonehenge's dimensions, built with the same circular layout, but from hollow plaster shells reinforced with rebar rather than prehistoric megaliths. It weighs considerably less than the original. It is also considerably easier to visit, since there are no timed entry requirements, and nobody is restricting your access at dawn on the solstice. Texas also has a second Stonehenge replica on the campus of the University of Texas of the Permian Basin in Odessa, which is a 2-scale model. 2 separate Stonehenge replicas in 2 entirely different parts of Texas is not something that comes up in most conversations about the state, but it probably should. Place 6. Enchanted Rock, Llano County. Rising 425 feet above the surrounding hill country landscape in Llano County, Enchanted Rock is a massive granite dome, one of the largest exposed batholiths in the United States. It is estimated to be about 1 billion years old, formed when magma pushed up through the Earth's crust and cooled underground over millions of years. As the softer rock around it eroded away over geological time, the granite dome was left exposed, sitting on the landscape like something placed there deliberately. The Tonkawa people believed the rock was haunted, that the creaking and cracking sounds it makes at night, caused by the rock expanding and contracting with temperature changes, were the sounds of ghosts. Spanish explorers brought similar stories back south, reinforcing the legend. The rock was used as a landmark by multiple indigenous groups, Spanish missionaries, and Anglo settlers for centuries. In 1841, Texas Ranger Captain John Coffee Hayes, surrounded by Comanche warriors on the rock's summit, reportedly held them off alone until reinforcements arrived. Today, Enchanted Rock State Natural Area draws hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. The main dome can be climbed on a trail that covers about half a mile and gains about 425 feet of elevation. What most visitors don't notice until they're standing on the summit is that the rock has its own small ecosystem. Vernal pools form in natural indentations after rain, supporting fairy shrimp and specialized plant species found almost nowhere else in the state. The granite itself is pink and, in certain light, shifts toward deep red. It is 1 billion years old. It is also genuinely beautiful, which makes it somewhat different from most places on this list, but no less strange for it. Place 5. The Eiffel Tower of Paris, Paris, Texas. The city of Paris, Tennessee has a replica Eiffel Tower. So does Paris, Texas. And the Texas version is topped with a large red cowboy hat. This was added deliberately to make the Texas Tower taller than the Tennessee one, and to ensure that nobody confused which Paris they were looking at. The Paris, Texas replica was erected in 1993 and stands about 65 feet tall, which is roughly 1/10 the height of the original in France. The cowboy hat added on top extends it a few feet further. It is located near Love Civic Center in Paris, Texas, which is in Lamar County in the northeast corner of the state, about 90 miles northeast of Dallas. Paris, Texas has a population of roughly 25,000 people and is also the title of a celebrated 1984 Wim Wenders film, which the town considers a point of civic pride, even though the movie is mostly set in other places. Paris, Texas greets visitors with a sign that reads, "Bonjour, y'all." The Eiffel Tower and the cowboy hat appear on the city's official seal. The town's position on this, that France is fine, but Texas does it better with a hat, is not a position that requires further justification. Whether or not this is the most Texan thing in Texas is genuinely debatable. Place 4. The Beer Can House, Houston. On a residential street in the Montrose neighborhood of Houston, there is a house covered entirely in beer cans. Not decorated with beer cans, covered. Approximately 50,000 beer cans are incorporated into the structure, along with garlands made from flattened beer can tops that hang from the eaves like aluminum curtains. The house is also surrounded by planters made from beer cans and a fence constructed from beer cans and bottles. The Beer Can House was the life's work of John Milkovich, a retired employee of the Southern Pacific Railroad, who began covering his home with beer cans in 1968. Over the following 18 years, Milkovich and his family consumed enough beer to gradually cover the entire exterior. He started with the lawn, embedding marbles and bits of concrete into the grass to eliminate mowing. Then he moved to the house itself, eventually encasing the siding entirely in flattened aluminum. Milkovich said he built it to cut down on the exterior house painting. This seems unlikely as the full explanation, but he maintained it consistently. He died in 1988. His wife Mary stayed in the house until her death in 1997. The property was then purchased by the Orange Show Center for Visionary Art, which restored it and opened it as a museum in 2008. Admission is free on certain days. The beer can garlands still rattle in the Gulf Coast breeze the way Milkovich designed them to, 50 years after he hung the first one. Place 3. The Giant Cross and Amarillo's Dynamite Museum, Amarillo. The same Stanley Marsh III who funded Cadillac Ranch also spent years installing hundreds of fake road signs around Amarillo, a project he called the Dynamite Museum. These weren't blank signs or empty posts. They were official-looking, diamond-shaped caution signs installed in people's yards, on buildings, and along roads throughout the city, bearing messages like, "Road does not end," "I have traveled a great deal in Amarillo," and "Lubbock is a grease spot." Marsh distributed the signs to anyone who would agree to put them up. He wanted them in towns beginning with the letter A. A few miles south of the Cadillac Ranch, another of Marsh's projects still stands, the Ozymandias Plains, a pair of giant human legs rising from the flat Llano Estacado, sculpted by panhandle artist Lightnin' McDuff in 1996. The legs are modeled after the ruins described in Percy Bysshe Shelley's famous poem Ozymandias. And a fabricated historical marker nearby claims that the full statue was destroyed by a Lubbock football team after a loss to Amarillo. None of this is true, of course. The marker is part of the artwork. Amarillo accepted all of this with characteristic composure. Just outside Amarillo, visible for miles on US Route 60, stands a 190-foot-tall steel cross that was erected in 1995 by a local minister named Steve Thomas. Known as the Cross of Our Lord Jesus Christ, it is the second tallest cross in the Western Hemisphere and serves no structural or practical purpose. It is simply very tall and very visible against the flat panhandle sky, which is probably the point. Place 2. Bracken Cave, San Antonio. On a private ranch north of San Antonio, inside a limestone cave that visitors cannot access without permission from Bat Conservation International, 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats spend their summers. This is not an estimate. It is the largest known bat colony on the planet. By some counts, it is the largest concentration of mammals in a single location anywhere on Earth. Every evening from around March to October, the bats emerge from the cave in a continuous column that can last for hours. The stream of bats is wide enough and dense enough to appear as a solid mass on weather radar. A single bat eats somewhere between half its body weight and its full body weight in insects every night. 20 million bats eat a lot of insects. Researchers have estimated that the colony at Bracken Cave consumes around 140 tons of insects per night during peak summer months, most of them agricultural pests. The cave was purchased by Bat Conservation International in the 1990s after the surrounding land came under threat of development. Public viewing events are offered to members on a limited schedule. The experience of watching the column of bats emerge from the cave at dusk, described by nearly every visitor as something that takes several minutes to process mentally, is available in no other location on Earth quite like this one. Austin's Congress Avenue Bridge bat colony is more accessible and draws more tourists, but with only about 1.5 million bats, it is a considerably smaller operation. Place 1. Terlingua, Brewster County. Terlingua is a ghost town in Brewster County in far west Texas, near the entrance to Big Bend National Park. It was a thriving mining community in the early 20th century, built around the extraction of cinnabar, a mercury ore, from the surrounding mountains. At its peak in the early 1900s, Terlingua had several thousand residents, a company store, a school, and a church. The Chisos Mining Company, which owned most of the operation, shut down in the 1940s when mercury prices collapsed after World War II. The residents left. The buildings were abandoned. What makes Terlingua strange is what happened next. Rather than remaining empty, the town was gradually reoccupied, not by miners, but by artists, former hippies, desert enthusiasts, and people who, for various reasons, preferred to live somewhere that was very far from everything else. A small, permanent population established itself among the ruins of the original town, and the ghost town became something odder than a ghost town that is also a functioning community. Today, Terlingua hosts the Terlingua International Chili Championship every November, which has been running since 1967 and is widely considered one of the most prestigious and eccentric chili competitions in existence. People camp in the desert, argue about beans and chili, a subject that divides Texas with something approaching theological intensity, and cook in what used to be a mining settlement. The original cemetery, where miners and their families were buried throughout the early 20th century, is still there, the graves marked by wooden crosses. The ruins of the old church stand without a roof. The chili competition continues. Texas operates on its own logic. A Prada store with no door, a Cadillac graveyard in a cow pasture, An alien buried in a small-town cemetery since 1897. 20 million bats pouring out of a cave north of San Antonio every evening. None of it gets an official explanation, and most of it doesn't need one. The state is enormous enough to contain almost anything, and apparently always has been. If this video was worth your time, go ahead and hit like. It genuinely helps more people find it. And if you want to keep exploring the strange corners of America, subscribe. Texas alone could fill several more of these lists, and we are nowhere near done.